You are now in the Backcourt, a Brooklyn Nets podcast presented by Ticketmaster. I am your host, Lucas Kaplan, writer for NetsDaily. I cover the team, also of Nets Film Focus, where we do great videos, insightful videos about Nets, real X's and O's. And normally, I'm joined by Sarah Kustok, Yes Network color commentator covering the Nets. But she is the busiest person in the world, at least that I know. And while she's been able to do every week so far this season, caught her at just a busy time of the year. She's down in Miami doing Unrivaled. She is flying back to Brooklyn. The Nets have an upcoming back-to-back this week at home against Houston on Tuesday night and against the Washington Wizards on Wednesday night. So I am recording solo dolo on Monday night, and we're going to talk about the Brooklyn Nets' last two games. They only had two games last week. I'm kind of liking these off days between games. So the Nets played last Wednesday, a victory against the Charlotte Hornets. They also played on Saturday night, a victory in Houston against the Western Conference's number 3 seed. I know the Rockets were a little banged up, but that was a pretty great win. And of course, it may not have been the primary focus of the NBA world. It was a pretty crazy weekend. I was out to dinner with some friends. We were going to, another spot. I was on the train. I had just snapped the string on my pants, and I was feeling real upset. I just hate when that happens, and they were falling down, and I was all annoyed and just muttering to myself the whole night. And then I saw Luka Doncic got traded for Anthony Davis, and kind of fixed my night. I don't know. I was like riding a high that I suspect a lot of you were, but I have finally been able to put down my phone, get off social media, stop reading all of the memes and stories and rumors about all that craziness, and lock into some pretty great Nets film from their past two games. And so I figured we'd start with the Charlotte game on Wednesday. And that was just a really well-rounded effort against an opponent that not only was missing a lot of their key players, so the Nets out-talented them, but they really outworked them and just out-executed them. And I think that's going to be a theme of this episode. So against Charlotte, all 10 Nets who played made a field goal, 8 made at least 3 shots, and they had 6 double-digit scores. But I do feel like I should lead with a guy who scored 9 points, and that is Trendon Watford. Brooklyn welcomed back T-Watt, who returned from a 21-game absence. He re-injured his left hamstring in December. He missed the start of the season with that injury, or, an injury to his left hamstring. I'm not sure if it was the same tear. But he came back, played a few games, got hurt again, and now is back after missing all those games. And I got to say, he did not look too rusty. He looked very physically fit and, as you'd expect with the Nets training and performance staff. But he was getting it done on the court, specifically in that Charlotte game. In total, he's played 33 minutes between Charlotte and Houston. Against Charlotte, he had 9 points, 4 boards, 2 assists. And, I don't want to say surprisingly, but very encouragingly, did not have a turnover against Charlotte, which is, a part of his game that might be a swing skill for him, how he's able to handle the ball at his size, attack the rim, and not turn the ball over. That's going to be a big key for him moving forward. And to come back against Charlotte, play 17 and a half minutes, not turn the ball over, it was just really impressive. And he made a bunch of nice plays versus Houston too, even though he didn't quite shoot as well. But, top of the list, I think you have to be impressed with Trendon Watford in his first action back, in so long. However, I would say that game, both games really, but against Charlotte, that game was won, on defense. And Brooklyn's ability really to force turnovers. It was a 17-11 victory for Brooklyn, in the turnover battle. So they forced 17, and they got out and ran. The Nets didn't light it up on their jump shots from 3, from the mid-range, what have you. But they outscored Charlotte 21-1 on fast break points. And a funny stat about that is it was all twos. The box score has them going 10 of 12 in transition. So all twos, an end one layup, and they scored 54 points in the paint against Charlotte. I really thought that a lot of their ancillary guys, so, not D'Angelo Russell, who was great, but is handling the ball all the time at the top of the key, Ben Simmons, who made a return from a 5-game absence, but Keon Johnson, Jalen Wilson, Ziaire Williams, these guys that have to attack closeouts, catch it on the move. I thought they were really good about not forcing the issue, some things that lead to turnovers or tough shots. They would probe, they'd get 2 feet in the paint, and if they didn't have anything, they'd kick it out and, reset the offense. And I think that really just helped Brooklyn play to their talent level. Sometimes the NBA is not about all the spectacular plays you can make, but it's about avoiding the negative ones. And that was a theme against Charlotte. It was a theme against Houston. And I think that's really what led to the win offensively. But again, they held Charlotte to, just 83 points on the night, 28.6% from 3. They shot under 40% from 2. They were just great, and it started with Nick Claxton, who I have to give a shout-out to. He had 3 blocks in the first quarter, and it's been a theme of the season, or a recurring, issue for the Nets, that they've really dropped off in rim protection in terms of blocks. That's not the only way to measure rim protection, opponents' field goal percentage, but they have dropped off greatly in blocks, and, so has Nick Claxton, down, closer to 1 when he's been closer to 2 blocks a game his whole career. But part of that has been the Nets playing a very aggressive defensive scheme. So when they're guarding pick and rolls this year, Nick Claxton, Day'Ron Sharpe, whoever it may be, Ben Simmons, they are at the level. They are trapping the ball handler. They are on the 3-point line. They are not just sitting back in the paint waiting for ball handlers to come to them. And that's, Nick Claxton hasn't done a ton of that in his career, but now he's really not doing that. He's not even really switching either. The Nets are trapping ball handlers, trying to create pressure. And against Charlotte, it obviously worked. They forced 17 turnovers. They got out on the fast break because of it all the time. But what was really encouraging is that Nick was still able to protect the rim despite this. So there were some plays in the first quarter. I have them in my notes here. His first block in the game, he hedges and recovers, which is not a common, pick and roll defense you see in the NBA a lot, considering how good these guys can shoot off the dribble. Nets, Jordi Fernandez has been doing that lately, and I thought the Charlotte game was the best. Both Nick Claxton and Day'Ron Sharpe handled that coverage. So one of the first possessions of the game, Nick Claxton meets the ball handler out front, recovers to his man, Taj Gibson, down low. Taj has to evade, another line of help defense, puts up a layup, and Nick Claxton has recovered from the top of the key all the way to the rim to block that shot. His next block, also in the first quarter, hedges, recovers, the ball gets swung to the other side. Taj Gibson's trying to seal him out of the lane. Doesn't matter, Nick Claxton gets there for a block. And so, 3 blocks in the first quarter. That third one was similar. All of them had to do with his ground coverage, his ability to defend on the perimeter and in the paint. And I think that just really set the tone for Brooklyn. Jordi Fernandez was extremely, gave him a lot of praise in his post-game press conference. And, I don't see why he wouldn't have. Per Jordi, he said, Nick and Day'Ron have done a really good job, and when they execute that coverage, our points per possession allowed is very good. Sometimes you blitz, you really trap to get the ball out of their hands. Sometimes you corral just to contain the ball handler. We do all these different things, but when we're aggressive, we impact the basketball and we make ball handlers uncomfortable. And when we're there consistently, we've done a great job, and we've shown that in different games. And I thought that was the key against Charlotte. At the point of attack above the key, the Nets brought defensive pressure, and I thought it flustered the Hornets. It was the bigs, but it was also the wings. The Hornets, guard-to-guard screens. The Nets were able to switch. They were able to navigate ghost screens. When a guy slips out to the 3-point line, they only got caught on that a couple times. And Miles Bridges, one of the only healthy starters that Charlotte had in that game, he had 23 points, but he needed 21 shots and 7 free throws to get there. He only had 1 assist to 2 turnovers. So, yeah, Charlotte's lead ball handler, lead scorer, maybe got his, but wasn't efficient doing it, and he wasn't really distributing the ball like that. And that, I think, is where you see how good the Nets are at the start of possessions. And again, another guy I want to give a shout out to was Ben Simmons. He had missed 10 of 14 games with a couple of various, day-to-day injuries. And right away in the first quarter, he scored 6 points. And they were all those righty floater, kind of hook shots we've been seeing him make this year. And something interesting I just want to point out about Ben, right? As he works back from serious back injuries, something he's been open about, trying to find his game again, the frequency with which he gets all the way to the rim is down, trending up in, recent weeks, but down overall from, maybe his Philly days or when he first got to Brooklyn. However, he's now shooting a career high from the mid-range, from the non-restricted area paint. So from 4 feet to 22 feet. You can look on Synergy. You can look on Basketball Reference. You can look on Cleaning the Glass. Synergy breaks it up into floaters, hooks, shot type. But he's really kind of figuring out his in-between game as a scorer. And those 6 early points against Charlotte came on like 3 straight, maybe 5 total possessions. He scored, came down a couple more times, then he scored again. And it is a joy to see Ben Simmons kind of navigate, this version of himself in his career. And he's been a really positive player for Brooklyn this year. It hasn't always looked the way you'd expect. Occasionally, yes, you want him to take even more shots. Jordy Fernandez has mentioned double-digit field goal attempts a game. But at the end of the day, the Nets are nearly 6 points better per 100 possessions when Ben is on the court. And, near the All-Star break, first week of February, I know sample sizes for on-off data, you want a little more than just half a season, but it's not nothing. And I do think Ben has really helped this team when he's been on the court, and I think his expanding kind of mid-range game, in-between game, has really helped that. And so it's cool to see him progress as a scorer. Last thing about that Charlotte game, quick shout-out to Seth Curry, right? Who became the 204th NBA player ever to hit 900 three-pointers. Cool little stat. I think he was the 203rd, and then Tyler Hero in a game after that caught him. So good for Seth Curry. Made a lot of threes when he was in Brooklyn. But that brings us to, I think, Brooklyn's more impressive win. It definitely was the more impressive win considering Houston is 3rd in the Western Conference. I'm not sure if they still are. I know they lost again on Monday night against the Knicks. But that's a good basketball team. I know they were missing Alperen Şengün. I know they were missing Fred VanVleet after halftime. I know they've been missing Jabari Smith Jr., but it's a good team, and the Nets took it to them. Houston is a team that prides themselves on defense, on energy, on toughness, and you saw that in spurts, but as the Nets radio reunion on the TV broadcast, Chris Carino and Tim Capstraw doing their first TV game together in 15 years. They were great all night, but Capper was all over it. The Nets were the more energetic. They were the more forceful team from start to finish, and they really deserved that win. There was no kind of shooting luck here. I know Houston didn't shoot well from 3, but man, the Nets really took it to them, and I think it started on like the first offensive possession of the game. The Nets shot around 31% from 3 against Charlotte, and though some various guys shot well, Keon Johnson was 0 of 7 from 3. First possession, he finds himself with an open 3 at the top of the key, swishes it, and I think that really set the tone. I think it helped him out. He had a strong game, and once again, though, it was an all-around effort. Ziaire Williams led the way with 21 points, but once again, 6 double-digit scores. Every one of the 9 Nets who touched the floor made a field goal. 8 of them hit at least 3. The ball was popping. They shot 55% from 2 and 37% from 3. And the final score was 110-98. And so typically you think, oh, you shoot that well. You only have 11 turnovers. Maybe you score more than 110 points. But I think the way Houston attacked that offensive glass, I think it just took a lot out of Brooklyn. It took a lot of effort. They needed 5 bodies in the paint at all times. I think that maybe limited the amount of transition points they were able to get and maybe suppressed their total score. But they played a really strong offensive and defensive game. And I thought they also ran when they had their opportunities. One guy I really have to shout out here is the Nets' other big man. I kind of mentioned him in the Charlotte game, and he played well there too, but Day'Ron Sharpe checks in the first quarter when the Nets are down 15-13. And at this point, it's not really apparent that the Nets are outworking Houston. You can tell they showed up to play, but it's not a huge disparity in effort and all that. But I'll tell you, when Day'Ron checks out of the game, nearly a quarter later, the Nets are up 34-25. So he won that first stint by 11 points, and he was just everywhere. On the first defensive possession, he had a hedge and recover against Fred VanVleet where he kind of reached and had to recover, and the Nets ended up getting a stop, but it wasn't perfect technique. And then after that, it was like possession after possession after possession. He deflects, a little pocket pass in the pick and roll, playing at the level. He totally sticks to Amen Thompson on a switch, runs down the court, kind of bullies Jock Landale under the basket, gets an offensive rebound tip in. And so, you may look at his final line from this game, and it's not crazy. It's 13 points, 4 rebounds, very low for him, but doesn't explain his activity inside. 2 of them were offensive and a block shot. But once again, Jordy was extremely complimentary of him after the game, and it's what Day'Ron has gotten better at. I've talked about it a lot on this podcast, but the fact that he's not just has way better technique around the rim and drop coverage, meeting, attackers in the restricted area, but he's sliding his feet on the perimeter. He's up at the level. He's getting deflections there. He's sticking to Amen Thompson. He's guarding in space. I remember he had a really nice one-on-one defensive possession against Miles Bridges in the Charlotte game. Miles Bridges ends up having to change direction 2 or 3 times and ends up actually making like a really tough righty hook shot, which is his offhand over Day'Ron. But Day'Ron's just been great. And he also shot 6 of 8 against Houston. And that is sort of his final frontier. He's hovering a little below league average as a finisher, right around the basket, but he's just made so many strides now nearing the end of his rookie contract that, he's gone from late first round pick, kind of unsure NBA guy, even after his first 2 years, to bona fide rotation player. Will come in off the bench and bring defensive energy, will attack the offensive glass, will be a problem, for other teams to handle. And the way he's worked on his body, the way he's improved at everything else, I trust his finishing to keep improving and for him to, become an even more valuable NBA player. So that's really been great to see. And I thought Houston was a great example of that because it wasn't captured just in the box score. Because when Day'Ron came in and he brought that energy and he pushed Jock Landale around a little bit and he started messing stuff up and the Nets took the lead, they didn't give it back. And from that point, the energy disparity, the effort disparity was clear. The Nets took it to Houston, and it was great to see. It obviously wasn't just effort. Houston does pick it up in the second half, and it's a little bit of a dogfight. So it's not just effort. The Nets obviously had to execute, basketball principles, and I think they did a great job of that. Houston shoots 46% from 2, 30% from 3, and if you rewatch it or if you we'll see in the rematch, tonight, Tuesday night, how the Nets do with this. I thought they did a great job at funneling drivers. So I thought if a guy caught the ball on the left side of the court, whoever's closing out on him funnels him maybe towards the baseline, and Nick Claxton or Day'Ron Sharpe is there early to meet him outside the paint. I thought Ben Simmons had a few really good, examples of this. Tosan Awoma continues to impress me with his closeouts. But I thought they really stuck to their principles, and you did not see Houston drive into the middle of the floor and spray the ball out. There was one possession early in the first quarter where Jock Landale kind of had it around the free throw line, wasn't going anywhere, and Trendon Watford comes up from the corner trying to get a steal, and it leads to a Tari Eason open corner three. And Tim Capstraw was all over it on the broadcast. He says, it's great to help, it's great to be active, but we got to have smart help. If Jock Landale has to hit a 16-footer at the end of the shot clock, that's okay. And then I think from the second to the fourth quarter, after that, the Nets were really strong about where they were helping from, where they were funneling guys. Houston is 28th in three-point percentage, and I don't think it's an accident that they ended up, shooting only 30% from three. I don't think it's an accident that they took a lot of threes. I think the ones they did take were ones the Nets were very okay with. Jalen Green, kind of similar to the Miles Bridges thing. Jalen Green, right? One of their only healthy, offensive starters. Şengün, Jabari Smith Jr., Fred VanVleet, that's a lot of offense missing from the lineup. And he scores 29 points, right? But he needs 24 shots to get there. Again, only 2 assists, and he's 3 of 11 from 3. And he was taking a lot of step-back threes, a lot of tough ones at the end of the shot clock. So I know three-point defense is built on variance. You have to hope some guys miss, but the Nets really did a good job there. And this is where I want to give a shout-out. Again, obviously the players get it done. There's a few more guys I could mention. I think the Nets really fixed some of their defensive rebounding issues. The Rockets missed a ton of shots, so they had a ton of opportunities to get second-chance points. They scored a lot of them. They scored 36 second-chance points, but changed kind of at the end of the first half when the Nets actually went small. They had Jalen Wilson and Ben Simmons in the front court at the end of the first half, and they took it to Steven Adams. I don't think Houston really got a second-chance point for that stint. I think that helped build the lead to 15, which it was at halftime. And credit those two, small guys, smaller forwards, for getting it done. But what I was going to say before that is I think this is one of, and again, it's hard to tell from sitting from your couch, but one of Jordi Fernandez's best games as a coach, as a just a tactician. I was just really impressed, and obviously been impressed all year. Been a tough job with guys in and out of the lineup, all these injuries, a couple trades. But against Houston, not a great offensive team and missing some guys, but Jordi really shined to me, right? So he was the associate head coach for the Sacramento Kings, but he was also, maybe informally, I don't know if they get this, I don't think coaches get these titles formally, but he was the defensive coordinator essentially. So more of his responsibilities were on the defensive side of the ball. His first year in Sacramento, they go from 25th in defense the year before to 14th in defense. And so he's a proven defensive guy. And I think it's funny when you think about European coaches, European basketball, European head coaches in the NBA, you think of them as offensive guys. They're on the cutting edge of, these concepts. And Jordy's talked about playing through the center, and he's coached Domantas Sabonis and Nikola Jokic and the handoffs and the side-to-side action. And we've obviously seen it, but you don't want to forget he's really made, some of his bread and butter on defense. And so they start, same thing, blitzing, kind of hedging and recovering early. And I think that gets to Jalen Green. I think that's part of why he wasn't super efficient. Houston only scores 38 points in the first half, and credit to the bigs. They're doing that well. But he's mixing in zone as well. And it was an interesting zone the Nets played against Houston, kind of a 2-3. And then halfway through the possession, once Houston swung the ball a couple times, the Nets would fall back into man. And the Nets did not play a lot of zone really before January, probably before a couple weeks ago. These last couple weeks, they've been playing zone. And to not just play a regular 2-3 zone, but a 2-3 zone in which, you really have to talk, and you're falling into man halfway through the possession, and you don't have a lot of practice time in the middle of January to put this in. I think it reflects well on Jordy. I think it's why he said the thing he has loved the most from his big men the last couple of weeks has been communication above all else. you really have to communicate to pull something like that off. And I think it's an example of how connected the Nets were and have been, in these 2 wins. Then we get into the third quarter. Houston starts Jeff Green. Shout out old friend Uncle Jeff. Over Steven Adams, try to catch up. They're down 15. They go 5 out, 5 3-point shooters on the court. And there's an early possession where Amen Thompson dribbles the whole length of the court, gets a transition layup. Jordy calls a timeout with 10 minutes left in the third quarter. Looking like Houston's going to make a little run. The building's loud. Amen Thompson just made a cool play. That timeout really shut down the momentum. Nets come out. They eventually build the lead, to 17. And they start switching 1 through 5. So I think that helped limit against the 5-out offense. We haven't seen Nick Claxton switch a bunch this year. I know he's kind of been famous for that. One of his most renowned skills as a defensive big. But he starts switching on to Jalen Green. Houston's not getting those short roll opportunities to play 4-on-3, which can be even more dangerous when you have 5 shooters, surrounding the perimeter, right? So now the Nets are switching. I think that was a great adjustment, in the second half, slowed down the offense. And I think it was a big part of why Jalen Green, Miles Bridges, and just in general, other teams' lead creators did not have great games. I know they scored a lot of points, but they really didn't drive great offense. And it is how the Nets held teams under 100 points in consecutive games. Pretty impossible to do in today's NBA, considering how offensively talented guys are. So just a couple of really strong wins for Brooklyn, and I'm glad got to dive a little deeper on this episode into them. Of course, I'd give Jordy Fernandez Brooklyn's finest, maybe for that performance if I could, but I think that goes against the spirit of the award, and I don't want to. Because a guy I haven't mentioned a ton yet, Ziaire Williams, was just awesome in both games. The stat lines reflected a little bit against Charlotte, right? He had 13 points on 5 of 10 shooting, 3 of 6 from 3, 3 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals, no turnovers. So, again, didn't do a lot wrong there. And then against Houston, leading scorer with 21 points, 8 of 15 from the floor, 2 of 6 from 3, 8 boards, an assist, and no turnovers, 2 blocks. And in Houston, you really felt it. If Day'Ron was the guy that kind of first brought it off the bench, that energy, Ziaire was right behind him, 1B, and he was great. And after the game, Jordy said he brings, quote, extreme energy, like what he always brings, but he also brought discipline today. Sometimes his energy could be all over the place, but in his last 2 games, he's just been amazing. He's disruptive. He uses his length. He's there rebounding, 8 rebounds. We start 3 guards, and Ziaire has 8 rebounds. And I thought that really made the difference. Not much more for me to say right there. I think Jordy really summed it up. Zaire's just been great. He had a couple great drives and kicks. He's one of those guys I mentioned that I thought his drives were, maybe not spectacular, but just solid. Moving the ball around, making good decisions. Really his best week, I think, as a Net. And I don't say that to denigrate the season he's had prior to this, but I thought he was just awesome these past 2 games. And it is a well-deserved Brooklyn's finest from me. I think he's probably had more important praise and, compliments on his performance. But hey, Ziaire, if you're listening, I give you my Brooklyn's finest award for the week. That brings us to the next Net. So, what am I looking, who are we looking for going forward? What do we want to see? I'm going to go with Keon Johnson. I know the 3-point shooting has fallen off a little bit. He's going to need to make some threes, especially playing in that off-guard role. But he's gotten a lot better this season, even just from the beginning of the year. And he's talked about feeling more comfortable from the beginning of the season. And I think it's also a testament to him that he's continuing to shoot these threes as Jordy Fernandez is, very clear about what he wants from his guys. Shoot threes if you're open. And it's hard to keep doing that if you're not making threes. Keon's doing it, and I think he's getting rewarded with more minutes and a bigger role because he is executing the game plan. And then I think his drives have gotten a lot better. He's the sort of athlete where he jumps off 2 feet, he gets to a jump stop, he can dunk on anybody, but it's also, I think, really helped him, getting to 2 feet, slowing down and surveying the floor. He had a play against Charlotte where got to jump stop on the left block, and there were some guys digging at the ball, and he kind of had to pivot a few times. Looked like he had nothing, and boom, head fake, moves the defense, throws a lob to Nick Claxton. His drives have gotten a lot better. He's really shown some stuff, and I want to see how that keeps improving. He's going to have to make some threes, so that's part of it too. But there's more and more and more drives and offensive opportunities that end well for him. And so the more that increases, the better the better player he's going to be. Against Charlotte, he ended up only shooting 7 of 18, but 7 of 11 from 2 and 4 of 4 from the free throw line. 5 boards, 4 assists, only 1 turnover. So you can see it's coming for him. And he shoots 3 of 9 against Houston, 3 assists, 1 turnover. So he's 2 turnovers, excuse me. Oh, and 5 assists. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong box score. Keon had 13 points, 5 assists, 2 turnovers. Did shoot 3 of 9. But you can see the signs are coming, and I'm just excited to keep watching him as we get to the All-Star break, and then, of course, the second part of this season. So, with that said, it's time to close on a little bit of trivia. Did mention Seth Curry before, and it got me thinking, who are the Nets with at least 900 threes? Now, 900 threes, there's been 200 guys, so I bumped it up a little bit. Who are the players? And you can pause this after I ask it and, get a better sense of, take your time and think it through. Play the Jeopardy music in your head. Who are the Nets with 2,000 threes in their career? Anybody who's played for the Nets that has 2,000 threes in their career. Big, nice, round number. Someone recently got to 2,000 threes in the NBA. It was Buddy Hield, not a Net. But I figured it'd be an interesting question. So, players that have been Nets that have 2,000 threes in the NBA. All right, you guys ready? Number 1 on the list, James Harden. He's one of 2 guys ever with 3,000 threes. Number 2 on the list, Vince Carter. He's 10th all-time in threes. I hit a bunch of them with the Nets, Obviously, VC3, iconic call. Then Jason Terry, right behind him on the all-time list. Yes, Jason Terry, the Brooklyn Net. I hope you didn't forget that one. That should give you a hint for the 4th Net with 2,000 threes, guy who's been a Net. Paul Pierce, same era of the Brooklyn Nets. And right behind him, Kevin Durant. So the Nets have had 5 players in franchise history join the 2,000 three-point make club. Only 17 guys in NBA history have done it. Buddy Hield just did it recently. So that's getting those threes up, excuse me. And they will continue to get those threes up, over the next week. They close out with a homestand before the All-Star break. So they will be rematching against the Houston Rockets at home on Tuesday night. They will be taking on the Washington Wizards on Wednesday night, the Miami Heat on Friday night, and then the Charlotte Hornets once again next Monday. And then the 76ers next Wednesday, all at home. So a 5-game homestand before the All-Star break. Almost forgot the Sixers there. Go to Barclays Center, watch the team for their 8 days off. I'm sure we'll have something fun for you then. It'll be, right around All-Star break. We can reminisce, on great Nets moments in All-Star history. There have been a bunch. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks for rocking with me. I know no Sarah Kustok this week. She's doing a great job down with Unrivaled. We've joked about, missing her on this show, missing her on the Yes broadcast, as Capper mentioned a few times. Well, they're not jokes. They're not jokes. We do miss her, but we'll be very excited to have her back. And that just about wraps up episode 15. Wow, episode 15 of the Backcourt. Thank you guys for rocking with us. Brooklyn Nets podcast presented by Ticketmaster. Shout out to them too. Rate us, like us, subscribe, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. All the positive feedback helps. Hope you enjoyed it. And we will see you next week.